What's up, boxing fans? This is TBE Boxing, back at you again. Today's topic: Shawn Porter slips out of Ldbc trap, avoids the fate of Kell Brook in fight against Crawford to protect Errol Spence. Let's chop it up and see what it's all about.
Got the money for minutes, pretty bitch, gotta show me titties. This is the life that I chose, huh? On the block with the pole, huh? This is the life that I chose, huh? On the block with the pole, huh? That life for riches, huh? That life for riches, huh? Pretty bitch, show me titties, huh? And I got the glazzy run up on me, I'ma make you get it. I'ma make you get it.
Okay, boxing fans, let's talk some boxing today. We're gonna chop up some boxing and talk about the fight that's not going to happen between Terrence Crawford and Shawn Porter, it looks like, at this point. It seems that, from what I'm hearing, Shawn Porter is pulling out of the negotiations for the fight against Terrence Crawford. As we all saw, in various reports, Shawn Porter is claiming that he's getting lowballed. Now, I did a video about that recently and, basically showed how this is not the case, but that be as it may, it looks like, Shawn Porter is not going to make the fight with Terrence Crawford. Now, we got to get back to how this whole fight even came about in the first place, okay? Our talk of this fight even came about, Shawn Porter fighting Terrence Crawford. How that fight actually came about is through the fact that Errol Spence was ducking Terrence Crawford. Well, yeah, as you all know, Errol Spence has been ducking Terrence Crawford for like the past 3 years now, okay? And so people kept, we basically, you got the Errol Spence Protection Brigade out there, people like, basically the Ldbc, generally speaking. But if you want to get specific, the three biggest protectors of Errol Spence out there is probably Spanning Boxing, Blue Blood Sports, and Boxing Eagle. Okay, so those are probably three, and they got a few other minor players out there like Contender Regime and a couple of other ones. Okay, but those are the guys, who basically make every excuse in the book as to why Errol Spence shouldn't fight Terrence Crawford. Okay, business, they come up with all kind of different reasons. I mean, we have all seen the reasons, all ridiculous reasons. Other side of the street, that's a new, they came up with that one. You name it, they've came up with the excuse as to why that fight should never happen. And so one of the things that they've been doing is basically, pushing other fighters in front of Spence to protect Spence from Terrence Crawford. So, like, for example, with Brook, they push Brook in front of Crawford is coming for Spence, and they just push Brook in front of Spence and say, oh, well, you gotta fight Brook first, or you gotta fight this guy first, you gotta fight that guy first. So their reasoning being that Crawford hasn't fought anybody. He needs to prove himself. This kind of talk is real foolish talk. Because as we all know, Crawford is the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, as rated by all the boxing professionals, boxing trainers, boxers themselves. Okay, so here's a guy who's the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, Terrence Crawford. But yes, still they're saying he hasn't proven himself. Proven himself against who? You understand? You see how ridiculous that is? The #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, as rated by all the boxing experts, boxing trainers, and even boxers themselves, they're claiming that he has to prove himself to fight Errol Spence, who is not rated as the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, who hasn't really fought much of anybody in his career. Okay? And they use all kind of excuses, pay-per-view numbers, this, that, and the other, So as you can see, it's a ridiculous scenario. But this is what's going on. This is what boxing has been reduced to with these LDBC fanboys and these YouTube YTBC fanboys who are out there talking about boxing today, okay? Basically, they're reducing boxing to a laughing stock. So it is what it is. All right, so basically, you know, they pushed Kell Brook out in front of Errol Spence to protect him. And, you know, we saw what, you know, Crawford did to Kell Brook. You know, most of these guys thought that Kell Brook was going to present a difficult fight. I mean, I you know, to be truthful, I thought that Kell Brook would put up a better fight than he did against Crawford. But, you know, I didn't think he was going to win against Crawford. But, again, a lot of these guys were thinking that, you know, they were claiming that, you know, Kell Brook is a good test for Crawford, you know, because, as you know, Kell Brook went up to fight Triple G and gave him a pretty good fight until he got stopped by a broken eye socket. And, you know, shout out to Kell Brook, by the way. And also, Kell Brook gave Errol Spence a pretty difficult fight until he was stopped again by another broken eye socket, okay, in that fight with Errol Spence. So it was a tough fight for most of that fight up until that point. So, and as you all know, Kell Brook was the first man to beat Shawn Porter. You know, unanimous. I think it was outpointed him, you know, very badly in a fight. It dominated the fight actually and beat Shawn Porter. What prior to that, Shawn Porter was undefeated. Okay, so they was all expecting, you know, because of all those reasons, they was expecting Kell Brook to put up a tough fight against Crawford, and as we all saw, that way, you know, nothing like that happened. Kell Brook basically dispatched. Crawford basically dispatched Kell Brook in 4 rounds, to the shock and dismay of the LDBC and the YTBC community. Okay, they were all shocked by the result of that fight because even some of them went so far as to pick Kell Brook to win the fight, okay, against Crawford, because they figured, you know, I mean, Kell Brook is a good fighter, and so they thought that Kell Brook would have won that fight. Now, prior to the fight, they were all talking about, you know, that's going to be the first test for Crawford. You know, it's going to be the first real test, the first real fighter he has fought, you know, which is just total nonsense. But again, you know, this is the kind of rhetoric these guys are spewing, you know, making up narratives as they go along. So after the fight, when Kell Brook got knocked out by Terrence Crawford, the whole rhetoric and the whole narrative changed now to that, oh, Kell Brook was a shot fighter. Kell Brook, you know, was washed. He had no punch resistance, because they couldn't believe the power of Terrence Crawford in that fight. Because if you watch Terrence Crawford at welterweight since he's moved up, you see that every fight that he has, it's like he's getting better and he's getting stronger. I mean, it's incredible to watch. The guy is actually getting stronger and better every fight that he fights at welterweight. And so these LDBC fanboys and YTBC fanboys were shocked at the power that Terrence Crawford displayed in his stoppage of Kell Brook. And so they started resorting to all kind of narratives, you know, about why Kell Brook lost that fight. But I'm not buying none of it. You know, I don't think Kell Brook is washed. Far from it. I think he's still can beat some of the so-called top welterweights out there right now. Okay, and that, you know, it's just that, you know, there's levels to the game. I mean, you know, Terrence Crawford is just levels above most of the competition he have fought. Everybody have fought so far at welterweight, he's dominated them. You know, like he dominated when he was 140 pounds, and like he dominated when he was 135 pounds. Okay, so this is what you know, what's going on. So now, the latest sacrificial lamb that they wanted to push in front of Errol Spence to protect Errol Spence from Terrence Crawford is Shawn Porter. Okay, so they're pushing Shawn Porter out there now. Now you got to remember something about the Shawn Porter. You know, before he fought Errol Spence, you know, as you all know, he lost to Errol Spence in a very tough fight. Okay, it was a tough fight. Some would say that Shawn Porter actually won that fight. Okay, you know, but yeah, he got dropped once by Errol Spence, and he lost the decision in that fight. It was a close fight, tough fight. Now, prior to that fight, everyone expected that Errol Spence was going to stop Shawn Porter. Okay, you can go back and look at their videos, look at their comments, what they were talking about before the fight. You know, they expected that, you know, which was similar to the way they thought about the Mikey Garcia fight, that he was going to stop Mikey Garcia, and that never happened. And so in the fight against Shawn Porter, far from, you know, stopping Shawn Porter, you know, it was a fight almost to the death, really. It was the toughest fight of Spence's career. But most people had thought prior to the fight that, you know, he was gonna, you know, they were out there saying that, you know, the style that Shawn Porter fight is perfect for Spence. He's gonna come forward. Spence is gonna stop him. You know, even Spence was out there, you know, drinking the Kool-Aid and talking about how he's gonna knock out Mikey Garcia. I mean, excuse me, knock out Shawn Porter. Okay, you know, he claimed that Shawn Porter couldn't fill up a room, a family dinner, and that you know, he was gonna go out there and he was gonna stop Shawn Porter. And so after the fight, you know, he had to eat his words. And, you know, actually, Shawn Porter actually, you know, confronted him after the fight and said, well, what happened to you stopping me? Something similar. I'm just paraphrasing, but, you know, Errol Spence had to grudgingly acknowledge that, yeah, you know, the fight was much tougher than he thought it was going to be. Okay. And so we saw that. And so now, you know, just because of that, because he gave Errol Spence a tough fight, these fanboys out there thinking that if they push Shawn Porter out in front of Errol Spence, you know, in the way of Terrence Crawford, that he's going to give Terrence Crawford a tough fight. Or, you know, he's going to actually maybe win, beat Terrence Crawford, and so that Errol Spence won't have to fight Terrence Crawford. Okay, this is basically what their mind, you know, this is how their mind is working. This is how they're thinking about Shawn Porter. But you know, I'm not thinking of that at all. I don't really believe that's going to be the case. I'm thinking that, and I don't think Shawn Porter believes that either. Okay, as we can see, you know, you can go to my other video that I just did about Shawn Porter. I played some clips in there about what Shawn Porter thinks about Terrence Crawford. He has nothing but respect for Terrence Crawford. He actually believes that, and has said on many occasions, that Terrence Crawford would beat Errol Spence, the guy, you know, that beat him. Okay, so these Ldbc fanboys and YTBC fanboys out there, and the, you know, the Errol Spence Protection Brigade, you know, are pushing Shawn Porter out in front of Errol Spence to protect him from Terrence Crawford, and thinking that, you know, he'll be able to stop Crawford from advancing on Errol Spence. Okay, and you know, so this is how this fight originally came about, really. Okay, and this is why we're talking about, you know, Crawford and Shawn Porter. But as you can see, like I said, Shawn Porter doesn't buy into all of that. He knows that Terrence Crawford is a tough fight, and he actually realizes that he can probably get stopped by Terrence Crawford. This is what Shawn Porter is probably thinking. I mean, he doesn't have a problem. I mean, I'm pretty sure he will fight Terrence Crawford if it comes down to it. But he's not going to fight Terrence Crawford unless he get, you know, compensated well, because he doesn't want to sell his knockout for less, you know, than $1 million, or for $1 million. Basically, I'm thinking that he's thinking that if he's going to go in there against a beast like Terrence Crawford and probably end up getting knocked out, he want to get compensated well for that. Okay, if he's going to be, you know, thrown under the bus to protect Errol Spence, he's not going to, you know, do it for chump change. Okay, and this is why he's playing hardball in the negotiations to in the fight against in the, you know, and maybe in the future fight, if it happened, it might look like it's not going to happen now, against Crawford. So, you know, he's saying he's not accepting $1 million. Okay, now for that fight. So now, I mean, you know, I don't really blame him. Okay, I mean, you know, why should he have to sacrifice himself to protect Errol Spence against Crawford and not get paid for it? Okay, so I don't blame him one bit. Okay, it makes sense, okay, because again, you know, Crawford, like I said, looking stronger and strong. He's looking stronger in every fight, okay, and to go in there against Crawford is not no easy thing to do, and more than likely, you're gonna get stopped. Crawford is on a knockout spree right now. He's been knocking out everybody he fought at welterweight, and I don't think Shawn Porter is gonna be any different in that regard. I think that more than likely, I mean, anything could happen in boxing, but more than likely, I'm thinking that if Shawn Porter goes in there against Crawford, he's going to get stopped for the first time in his career. And I think Shawn Porter, you know, believed that as well. Okay? So he's in no rush to jump in there against Terrence Crawford, you know, just to protect Errol Spence. I mean, you know, if all these LDBC fanboys thinking that, you know, Crawford hasn't, you know, fought anybody, because that's what they're really saying, that he has to fight Errol Spence to prove himself. I mean, the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world has to fight. Shawn Porter to prove himself in order to fight Errol Spence. And you know, basically, again, it's just a way of trying to protect Errol Spence from Crawford, because all these guys know that if Errol Spence goes in there against Crawford, he's probably going to suffer the same fate as Kell Brook or Shawn Porter. He's probably going to get stopped by Crawford, because Crawford is not a, you know, he's looking better and better in every fight. Okay, and we can't really say the same for Errol Spence. As we saw, he had a tough fight with Shawn Porter, and you know, he looked a little better against Danny Garcia, but you know, he's not looking as strong, as fast, and as powerful as Terrence Crawford. He hasn't knocked anybody out in I don't know how long. Okay, he's not stopping his opponents. He's going in there and he's, you know, basically, you know, fighting volume punches. He's not, you know, showing sharpness, power, or domination of his opponents. I mean, he more or less, I guess you could say he did much better against Danny Garcia than he did against Shawn Porter. Okay, but you know, it is what it is. So Shawn Porter is, you know, is saying that now, you know, he's not really interested in fighting Terrence Crawford, not for $1 million anyway. Okay, and so it looks like you know, he's escaping the trap that was set for him by the Ldbc. Okay, and you know, in their effort to protect Spence. Okay, and it looked like he's not going to fall into that trap. Okay, because it is a trap, I would think. And like I said, I think that he probably gets stopped, you know, by Crawford. And you know, what would happen after that is that the Ldbc and the Spence Protection Brigade will come up with a new reason why Errol Spence shouldn't fight Crawford. They probably try to put somebody else there in front of Crawford, in front of Spence to protect Spence. They'll probably put somebody like maybe, you know, the young phenom that's coming up, Boots in his, or you know, whoever. I mean, they're gonna try any and everything to avoid the fight with Terrence Crawford at all costs. Okay, because they don't want to see that fight. I mean, they're supposed to be the best, supposed to be fighting the best, but yet still, you know, they don't want to see that fight. You know, I mean, it's the most ridiculous thing I ever seen. So it looks like at this point, you know, Errol Spence was out there talking about fighting CARNE-LO at 160. You know, he had said that, I mean, he never called out CARNE-LO. Let's be clear about that, okay? You know, even though these people out there saying that, but as I was proving in my videos and show you, you know, the actual clips, he never called out CARNE-LO. He just said that every time somebody asked him about Crawford, he pivoted to talking about how I can go up and fight CARNE-LO at 160, but never actually calling out CARNE-LO. Never saying to CARNE-LO, let's fight at 160, but just saying that could happen, okay? And, you know, at first CARNE-LO said, well, not at first, CARNE-LO actually said, nah, I'm not really interested in fighting Errol Spence. You know, I got business to take care of at 160. I'm trying to unify the titles up there, become undisputed at 168 pounds. And so he wasn't really interested in that fight. But sometime after that, his trainer, Eddie Reynoso, came out and said that, okay, you know, I mean, we'll be willing to go down to 160 and fight Errol Spence. I mean, that's REYNOSO. We don't know. I mean, we already heard what CANELO said. He said he's not interested, but his trainer REYNOSO is saying that he might be willing to go down to 160 and fight Errol Spence. Okay, so just a second. So ever since that happened, we haven't heard no talk from Errol Spence about fighting Canelo. Okay, now if you're really interested in fighting Canelo at 160, and you heard Eddie REYNOSO's trainer says, okay, you know, it might, that could happen, but Errol Spence and his team have went silent since then. So basically, their bluff has been called, and so now they're not even talking about fighting Canelo anymore. They're talking about, I think now they're talking about his next fight is going to be against Abdul Kakahu. Yeah, some guy from Russia or Ukraine or whatever. You know, that's going to be his next fight. I saw this guy, I think his name is Abdul Kakarov. You know, he is a guy, you know, who fights. He has very short arms, looks like a kangaroo, you know, or a T-Rex, little arms swinging. You know what I'm saying? So that's the guy that they want to fight next. Somebody that nobody knows about. Okay, that's supposed to be his mandatory, but we all know that Shawn Porter is Errol Spence mandatory. Is one of his mandatories for one of the belts. So, but it looks like they're not really interested in fighting Shawn Porter again. Probably because there's not going to be any money in that fight and there's not much demand for it. Okay, the biggest fight for Errol Spence at welterweight, you know, at any weight, is actually Terrence Crawford. But as we all know, Errol Spence has done everything in his power to throw that fight under the bus and doesn't want that big money fight at all. He's trying to fight anybody, talk about fighting any and everybody but Terrence Crawford, and for obvious reasons. Okay, we all know why that is. So they're trying to throw Shawn Porter out there, but it looks like Shawn Porter wised up and realized that, you know, if he goes out there and takes on Terrence Crawford, he's probably going to get stopped for the first time in his career. And if that's the case, he wants to get compensated for being stopped, because if he gets stopped by Terrence Crawford, his value is going to go down even lower than it is now. Okay, because he has 3 losses in his record. He don't want to add a knockout to that and have 4 losses. One by knockout from Terrence Crawford, because that's what Terrence Crawford is doing right now. He's knocking people out or dominating. Okay, so more than likely, you know, based on what we have seen from Terrence Crawford, that would, you know, would probably be what happened. Now, we know that Shawn Porter is not going to knock out Terrence Crawford, because who has Shawn Porter ever knocked out? Okay, so you know, Shawn Porter is not known as a knockout puncher, so he would have to basically outbox Terrence Crawford for 12 rounds. And who believed that can happen? Who believed that Shawn Porter could outbox Terrence Crawford for 12 rounds? No one believes that. Okay, so he's not going to knock out Terrence Crawford, and he can't outbox Terrence Crawford. So what do you think is going to happen in the fight? Okay, so more than likely he's going to get stopped, just like anybody else. Terrence Crawford is a dog. He's not going to go in there and play with Shawn Porter, even though Shawn Porter is a good friend of his. He's going to go in there and take care of business. Okay, and so, you know, and the same goes for Errol Spence. Errol Spence hasn't really knocked anybody out recently. He could even knock out Danny Garcia. Could even knock out lightweight Mikey Garcia. So how would he knock out or stop or outbox Crawford? It's more than likely it's not going to happen, because Crawford got the faster hands. He got more power than Errol Spence. He got better footwork than Errol Spence. Okay, more ring generalship. Yet even have more experience than Errol Spence. So at the end of the day, we can see why Errol Spence don't want to fight him, and we, you know, I understand that, and we can see why, you know, Shawn Porter is kind of backing out of the, you know, the fight, because at the end of the day, Shawn Porter is mandatory to fight Crawford. So the ball is in Shawn Porter's court. He can decide to take the fight or not, because he's the mandatory. And if he activates the mandatory to fight Terrence Crawford, then Terrence Crawford has no choice but to fight him. But as we all know, He hasn't done that, and you can see my last video to see the proof of that. He hasn't activated the mandatory at all in the fight against Terrence Crawford. He's only talking about fighting Terrence Crawford at the end of the day. So we see the result of that. Now we hear that, you know, he's no longer interested in that fight. And so he's probably going to go ahead and try to activate the mandatory against Errol Spence, where he have a better chance of winning that fight, because they had a tough fight. And it's conceivable that Errol Spence is not the fighter he once was, the fighter that actually fought Porter in their original fight. And, you know, he probably lost a step or two. And so he could be vulnerable to Porter at this point in his career. So we'll see what happened with that, okay? You know, but at the end of the day, you know, a lot of these guys, these LDBC guys, not LDBC, but these PBC guys are kind of limited what they're going to do right now. I mean, when we look at where Errol Spence is right now, you know, and look at his options, you know, he couldn't fight Manny Pacquiao if Manny Pacquiao decide to take the fight, because when it comes to Manny Pacquiao and Errol Spence, you know, Matt Pacquiao is the guy, you know, he's a really big fish, okay? And, you know, compared to Errol Spence, and the fight is going to happen if Manny decides it's going to happen, not if Errol Spence decides it's going to happen, okay? It's going to happen on Manny's terms, okay? So, if Manny doesn't fight him, okay, Errol Spence doesn't have much options left. Who's he going to fight next to make money besides Terrence Crawford? There's nobody else for him to fight, okay? He could fight Keith Thurman if they resurrect Keith Thurman from his semi-retirement, which it looks more than likely that's probably the best option they have right now, is to resurrect a semi-retired Keith Thurman and throw him in there with Errol Spence to try and make a fight, you know, to get a fight that people would be interested in. Okay, if not that, then who else do they have at welterweight that Errol Spence can fight? You know, besides mandatory Abdul Kakarov or Abdul Kakahu, you know, who else is there? Ugas. I mean, you know, that's not a money fight. Nobody's really going to be really interested in seeing that fight, you know, because at the end of the day, you know, we could talk about pay-per-view, and, you know, a lot of these guys out there, you know, that's one of the next reason they're trying to use to, you know, to claim that Errol Spence is the A side in the fight against Crawford, and if Crawford don't take 60-40 or 70-30 or whatever Errol Spence give him, then they shouldn't make that fight. Okay, they claim that he's a star. Now, in the fight against Danny Garcia, there is, you know, the expectation for that fight in terms of pay-per-view numbers was 600,000 to 700,000 pay-per-views. Okay, this was what the team, the people making the fight, you know, they expected that fight was going to garner at least 600,000 to 700 pay-per-views, but the fight had less than 250,000 pay-per-view, and according to Bob Arum, who I wouldn't exactly say is the voice of truth, but he does know about boxing, he said that fight did less than 107,000 pay-per-view. But the number that came out is 250, somewhere around there. So as we can see, regardless of what these YTBC and LDBC fanboys and the Spence Protection Brigade is out there saying, that pay-per-view wasn't a success, and that doesn't make Errol Spence a pay-per-view star, because, like I said, the fight did less than half of what it was expected to do. It was expected to do 600 to 700,000 pay-per-views, and it only did maybe 250 at the most pay-per-view. So as you can see, that was a spectacular failure in terms of pay-per-view numbers. Okay, it didn't do as well as they thought it would have done. So, you know, it is what it is. So in terms of fighters out there that's gonna make money in terms of pay-per-view numbers for Errol Spence, there's not many fighters out there. The only fighter out there that they can really depend on to make a good pay-per-view, probably more than 1 million pay-per-view, is Terrence Crawford. But as you can see, they don't want that fight because they're thinking that Crawford will end up stopping Errol Spence in spectacular fashion, and, you know, somewhat similar to what happened to Brook, and, you know, that would be the end of the Errol Spence hype train. Okay, and so, you know, they don't want that at all, because there's not many so-called stars left over there at PBC. Danny Garcia is on his last legs as a fighter. He's past his prime. Shawn Porter is probably somewhere near, the top of his prime, and probably on the downslide at this point in his career. He's not doing any big pay-per-view numbers. The only guy left that probably couldn't do a good pay-per-view number because they have a fan base is Mikey Garcia, and he's been talking about a rematch. Since he lost the first fight, but I don't know if that's in the pipeline or not. It doesn't look like it. So there's not many options left for Errol Spence at welterweight if he doesn't get a Manny Pacquiao or Terrence Crawford. Okay, and so, but we're gonna see how that plays out. If they're gonna continue to duck Terrence Crawford like he's been doing, or they're gonna come to their senses and make the fight, and make the big money that Errol Spence is looking for both guys. It will be a big bonanza fight, and it will be a win-win for everybody, including boxing fans who will, actually get to see a fight that they actually want, instead of getting spoon-fed mismatches and journeyman fighters against Errol Spence being marketed as so-called Hall of Fame fighters, like for example Danny Garcia. They talk about, oh, he's a Hall of Famer. Danny Garcia's not a Hall of Famer. I mean, he has lost every fight that he has had to step up at welterweight, and so and now he lost against Spence. He never actually won any fight at welterweight that was a step up fight, and so this whole idea that Danny Garcia was a better fighter or more deserving of a fight against Errol Spence than Terrence Crawford is ridiculous, and and we all saw what happened in that fight. So again, it looks like Shawn Porter decided that to go against expectations. He's not gonna fight Terrence Crawford and become a sacrificial lamb in an effort to protect Errol Spence, from Terrence Crawford. He stepped out of the way. He sidestepped, he dodged the bullet, and so it looks like he's not going to fight Terrence Crawford. But we'll see what happens. Maybe the fight, he might decide to change his mind, or it could happen. We don't know. We'll have to see, as time goes along. So at this point, it looks like Errol Spence is looking for an opponent for his next fight. We don't know who that's going to be. More than likely, it's not going to be Terrence Crawford because, like I said, they are definitely afraid of putting Errol Spence in there with Terrence Crawford for obvious reasons. As we see, Terrence Crawford is looking strong, he's looking fast, he's looking powerful, and he's looking better and better every fight. So Errol Spence wants no part of that. Okay, he's doing everything in his power and anything he can to avoid that fight with Terrence Crawford for as long as he can. And it looks like Shawn Porter is not gonna jump in front and take the bullet for him either. So we don't know what's gonna happen now. So we'll have to see how it plays out in the end. But yeah, as far as we know right now, the fight, the negotiation between Shawn Porter and Terrence Crawford is over. He says he's not gonna take $1 million for that fight, even though, again, just to make a point. Errol Spence guaranteed purse in fight is $1.5 million. Okay, so if he goes to fight Errol Spence in a mandatory fight, if he exercises the mandatory against Errol Spence, he's gonna get the 75-25 split that the mandatory calls for, and $1.5 million is what Errol Spence is guaranteed, and so 25% of that is around $300,000. So that's way less than $1 million. So Porter will actually get more money fighting Terrence Crawford, because Terrence Crawford guarantees $4 million, okay, per fight. And so that's what his contract calls for. And so if Shawn Porter fights Terrence Crawford, 25% of $4 million is $1 million. Okay, and so we see that right now when it comes to guaranteed purses, and Terrence Crawford is the highest paid fighter in the welterweight division, which is why the talk about him leaving Top Rank to go to PBC is just foolish talk. Why would you leave where you're getting $4 million guarantee to go to PBC? Is PBC going to pay him $4 million guarantee for every fight? I don't think so. They're not even paying Errol Spence, who's supposed to be their top dog and their pay-per-view star, that kind of money. They're paying him $1.5 million, which was his highest guarantee that he's gotten so far. Previously, he was getting $1.2 million. Okay, in the Danny Garcia fight, he got the $1.5 million guarantee purse, okay, which is his highest guaranteed, you know, so far, okay, except for the unification bout that he had with Shawn Porter, where he got $2 million, the highest purse, guaranteed purse of his career, okay. So here it is, Errol Spence is getting $1.5 million guarantee. That's what he got against Danny Garcia. Crawford is getting $4 million guarantee no matter who he's fighting, okay. But they want Terrence Crawford to leave Top Rank to go to PBC. For what? Okay, I mean, why would he do something like that when he's making $4 million guarantee and wouldn't make no way close to that at the PBC? So, you know, we gotta know what we're talking about with this boxing, and so it is what it is. So, like, again, that $1 million that Shawn Porter is turning down, if he fights Errol Spence, he's not gonna get anywhere close to that, and you will see for yourself if that fight is ever made. Okay, he won't get anywhere close to that. So the biggest money he's gonna get is against Terrence Crawford. So if I was him, if he really wanted that money, or if he was serious, then he'd just take that fight and you know, get the money from Errol Spence. I mean, from Terrence Crawford, because he's not gonna get that kind of money against Errol Spence, or you know, for any fight at the PBC. His last fight, he fought Formella and he got $1.2 million. You know, which was, you know, pretty good money against a guy like Formella. Okay, but we'll see what happened in terms of you know, how the fights up, how these matches play out as we go along. But it looks like, again, like Shawn Porter is not gonna take that fight with Terrence Crawford, and I like I said, I don't really blame him. At the end of the day, you know, fighting Terrence Crawford is a dangerous proposition, and you're probably gonna get stopped. So if you're gonna get stopped, you're probably gonna want some kind of, you know, security package, because your value is going to go down if you get stopped against Crawford. So I understand why he might want more than $1 million, you know, to fight Terrence Crawford. But at the end of the day, he's not going to get that $1 million against Errol Spence. But then again, Errol Spence, he doesn't have to worry about getting knocked out. Okay, so it is what it is. So you know, I think that's all I have for right now. I'm going to leave it there. This is TBE Boxing. I'm out.